Hi, my name is Jacqueline Juma. I'm the technical expert as regards digital payments at AfricaNenda. I'll be speaking through I'll start off the session by just having a discussion on how the research came about and the approach that we used. So the set of instant and inclusive payment systems, which we otherwise call SIIPS, or commonly known as SIIPS Africa report, will be an annual think piece going forward, following research every year to capture different thematic aspects of instant payment systems. Our definition of IIPS is very simple. These are retail payment systems that are multilateral, open loop, and that enable digital push payments in near real time for use 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, or as close as possible to that. The 2022 SIIPS report is the first of a series of these reports and the outcome of a collaborative initiative by AfricaNenda, the World Bank Group, and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Research was conducted by Senfree in collaboration with the Frontier Consulting Services Limited Kenya for consumer focus. The research objective was to inform the public and private sector stakeholders in Africa and beyond about the developments in the instant retail payment ecosystem in Africa, including an assessment of the inclusivity of such systems, both in terms of functionality, and by that I mean accessibility to all end users, and governance, which means the extent to which all licensed payment providers have fair access and design input opportunities. Please note that only systems with live transactions and functionality as of June 2022 were considered existing IPS, and others that were considered in development because they are not yet live in terms of transactions. They're basically being developed. For this research, we used a mixed method approach, whereby number one, we looked at the supply side landscaping by conducting desk research, which involved data from various sources, private sector resources, development partner literature, and so on, as well as 25 interviews with key informants across different countries. And these included experts within the instant payments system space, regulators, instant payment systems providers, payment service providers, and other experts. And this was between April and July 2022. And this helped inform various trends, barriers, opportunities, typologies of IIPSs across board. Number two, we also considered research on the demand side, again, to just make sure that it is market-centric. This involved extensive in-country qualitative and quantitative research covering low-income adults, individuals, as well as MSMEs, that is entrepreneurs, across 7 countries. And this involved about 1,400 respondents through in-depth interviews, as well as 50 focus group discussions across the countries. And I'll later on showcase what these countries were. In terms of the outputs, the research outputs involved detailed and summary reports in English and French, case studies. We have 4 case studies where 3 are domestic and 1 regional IPS. The domestic ones involve Kenya's PesaLink, Nigeria's needs instant payments, which is NIP, Ghana Interbank Payment and Settlement System, GIPS, Instant Pay, which is called GIP, and Southern Africa Development Communities, SADC, transactions cleared on an immediate basis, which we call TCIB. We also have an interactive map on our website, and I would encourage all of you to visit our website for more details as regards the reports, the case studies, as well as the interactive map for more insights. In terms of the insights and key highlights, I'll welcome my colleague Zach to share some of the key highlights as regards the IPS landscape. Zach?
Thanks, Jacqueline. Barry, if we can move to the next slide. Thank you. As you can see from this map, there are truly a diverse set of entities and countries that have developed instant payment systems. As of June 2022, which was our cutoff date for this report, there were 26 domestic instant payment systems live and 3 regional systems. For this report, we developed a typology of instant payment systems, splitting them into the 4 types that are represented by these 4 colors you can see at the legend at the bottom of the slide. The bank and mobile money, IPS, are systems that only connect those provider types. Cross-domain IPS are those that provide connectivity between various types. That's usually bank and mobile money, but it may also include microfinance institutions, fintechs, and payment service providers. The final category is sovereign currency systems. These use a central bank digital currency as the sole instrument. There's only one live today, which you can see is the little dot under Nigeria, which is eNaira. Historically, the IPS were siloed, being either existing within the bank or mobile money vertical. But over the past several years, they've been moving more towards interoperability with cross-domain systems. This is signifying a movement from decentralized to centralized digital financial services on the continent. Onto the impact. In 2021 alone, these systems cumulatively processed 16 billion transactions, equating to a value of nearly $1 trillion US. A growing share of that is coming from the interoperable cross-domain schemes. It's not all positive news, though, as the progress has been fairly unequal. There are only 4 systems which have really been able to reach pervasive levels of usage. And for the rest, the average transaction size indicates that the systems tend to be predominantly used for higher income individuals. On that note, we'd like to get a quick check on your perspective on the inclusivity for instant payment systems. Barry, could you please bring up the polling question? Thank you. So we'd like to get a sense of what your understanding is of inclusivity for IPS. Ideally pick 2, but this is multiple choice, and we'll give you about 30 seconds to complete this poll.
Zach, we can give 10 more seconds. People are still voting.
Sounds good.
All right, you're done.
All right, thank you all for voting. I can see already there are some interesting findings here. And Sabine, in our analysis, we established that there is more to be done to achieve inclusivity. Would you mind speaking through what we're seeing today?
Sure. Thank you very much, Zach. My name is Sabine Mensah, and I'm Deputy CEO for AfricaNenda, working on partnerships and capacity building. So for us, the question we've asked ourselves is whether all the IPS that we're seeing on the continent, whether they are inclusive or not. And frankly, the answer to the question is not a binary one, but rather a spectrum. So we see inclusivity as a journey, and hopefully, we can reach an aspirational state of mature inclusivity to meaningfully advance access to financial services for all Africans. So let's start from an end user's perspective, because for us, this spectrum is really based on the breadth and depth of sustained usage of instant payment systems. So from a customer perspective, at the most basic level, we have to make sure that these systems fulfill a minimum set of functionalities. It has to enable channels that are most used by the population in the country. So if you have a mobile money driven market, then that national, domestic, or regional IPS has to enable mobile money access as well. But beyond also the access, it also has to enable functionalities. It has to enable use cases that are relevant and can build a fulfilling digital ecosystem. So at the bare minimum, you have P2P, sending money to somebody else, but you also have P2B, so merchant payments. And frankly, when I think of myself, and perhaps you will agree with me, is that I do more payments, household goods, than I send money to people in a day or in a week. So being sure that at the most basic level, that basic level of inclusivity enable at least person to person and person to business is also key for us. Now, as you move through that spectrum from basic inclusivity to progress inclusivity, we are adding some more layers into that, really from a governance perspective, particularly 3 areas that we're looking into. One being sure that all licensed payment service providers within the country, or if we're looking at a regional scheme within the region, have an opportunity to not only be part of the scheme, but also to provide input into decision-making and the design of the scheme. So that really is one area of that inclusive governance that coming into play. It is also key that interoperability is enabled across all. And last but not least, the central bank has a key role to play, of course, in terms of governance framework, but also bringing that inclusivity mandate, that pro-poor focus of the scheme, so that, you know, that can be championed across the ecosystem beyond, you know, individual interest and to really focus on better serving the poor. Now, when we move again a little bit further throughout that spectrum at the mature inclusivity level, it's really looking at enabling maximum functionality, enabling as much of the governance, the inclusive government. So looking at the full range of payment use cases that are enabled. So beyond the P2P and the P2P that we're seeing, looking at G2P, P2G, B2B. So making sure that the ecosystem enable not only for an individual and an SME for that matter, but to pay money, receive money, but also that payers such as the government, or really big payers in most countries, can leverage the digital rail to also send payment as well. And individuals can also leverage digital payment to do payment to businesses and government and so on. So making sure that, you know, the use cases are expanded is also key, and making sure also that from a consumer protection focus, that the recourse mechanism that are available to customers when the system doesn't work as planned are transparent and are also efficient. I think that's a key area. In addition to, of course, making sure that there are protections around data and cybersecurity laws. So the cost factor as well is key, but just to give you an idea of throughout the spectrum, making sure that these schemes are really serving and enabling the participation of the most vulnerable people into that ecosystem. So cost matters. It matters on both sides of the aisle, for that matter, for both clients and for service providers as well. So this is, in a nutshell, the spectrum on inclusivity. And if we move forward to see out of the 29 schemes that we have mapped up as active, you can see the ones how we've been able to rank these schemes. If you can move to the next slide to show the ranking of the countries, that would be great. Thank you very much. Awesome. So, I mean, that inclusivity picture is actually, it's a complex one. Many of the IPSs are reaching the basic criteria, and you can see there are some that we haven't been able to rank. And this is due to lack of data and information, publicly available data and information. So we hope that as we do these on a yearly basis, we'll be able to fill in more of these this information. So we currently have 11 that are meeting the basic inclusivity. And we see we have 5 that are meeting the progress criteria. So, I mean, it's great. So we have to recognize what is being done. We also have to recognize that sadly, none of those have reached so far the mature inclusivity aspirational state that we are looking at. However, there are facts that are promising and they are on their way to the mature inclusivity. So I think the lessons here is also to take into account that some of these schemes are young and that they are in the process. And as we move forward towards the year, we will see more and more being classified through that journey from basic to progress, and hopefully also from progress to the mature state of inclusivity that we are looking forward to. All right, so I think it's important to bring in the consumer's perspective. And then Jaju, it would be nice if you can share with us what the consumer research has uncovered in terms of digitization opportunities that can encourage sustained usage. So what do you see as the key opportunities? Jaju, to you.
Thanks, Sabine. Yeah, in terms of the demand side, the research involved, first of all, the research involved 7 sample countries. These are DRC, Egypt, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, Tanzania, and Zambia, and which were additionally clustered as leading, emerging, and nascent from the degree of user adoption of digital payments to inform how instant payment systems can be designed to better meet the needs of end users. We mapped the usage of digital payments in the study countries in aggregate and across specific user groups. Firstly, we established that there has been an increase in how many people have, in the number of people that have digital wallets or accounts. The P2P use case need is well met. About 82.5% of the respondents send money to friends and family digitally, and about 79.8% receive funds digitally. Mobile money-based instruments dominate the digital payment landscape as expected, because Africa has the greatest mobile money rails, and also all 7 countries sampled have an active IPS that allows the use of the preferred payment instrument in that country by consumers. And lastly, USSD is the most commonly used channel for mobile money amongst the respondents. However, while there has been this significant uptick in the adoption of digital payments, sustained and frequent usage is often lacking. In terms of the frequency of making payments, the day-to-day payment needs, such as buying groceries, paying for transport, are largely still cash-based. Across the study countries, access is still impeded by a lack of network connectivity, limited documentation, and language barriers, among other issues. And therefore, the adoption of digital payments is increasingly, as we can see, being driven by the need to undertake specific payments digitally and out of additional concerns, for example, safety concerns and other challenges, including privacy concerns, etc. The degree of usage is influenced by the prevalence of network effect, where, in cases where more people accept digital payments, then more people are likely to make these digital payments. And at the same time, real and perceived costs are things that are top of mind amongst many people, and the traceability and speed of digital payments. So the user needs exist both at household and MSME levels beyond P2P and P2B, but are not adequately met by existing payment systems. So where is the opportunity for digitization of use cases beyond P2P, and what does it mean for IPS design? For this research, household shopping, daily transport payments, and receiving income are some of the frequently mentioned payment needs that are yet to be digitized across a large proportion of the sample that was considered. And particularly the percentage of individuals conducting household shopping by digital means, which is about 26%, is still relatively low compared to the proportion of people who use digital payments more broadly, like, for example, in the P2P perspective. Even in Kenya, with a very mature mobile money ecosystem, P2B payments are lagging. And in some instances, P2Bs are disguised as P2Ps. With 34% of individual respondents from this sample using digital payments for this use case, that is P2B. Receiving income digitally reinforces a digital ecosystem and supports the network effects of digital payments, but this has not been optimized, especially amongst low-income segments or the low-income people. At the micro and small enterprise level, digital payments to suppliers, receiving customer payments, and sending staff some money or allowance, for example, for transport or whatnot, emerged as key payment needs. Also, receiving payments from customers is the most frequent payment need amongst MSME respondents, with about 70% of entrepreneurs respondents noting that this is a frequently occurring use case. Yet, less than 50% of MSME respondents, and that's the entrepreneurs, indicate that they receive digital payments from a consumer during the past week. This, as I stated earlier, you realize that it mirrors the individual example finding that payments for household goods and services are largely cash-based. In Ghana and Nigeria, for example, the receiving of customer payments digitally is pervasive amongst entrepreneurs, with just over 90% of MSMEs in each country noting the digitization of this use case. Now, to promote the adoption and usage of digital payments beyond P2P, we need to consider how best the IPS can support additional and evolutionary use cases, like, for example, merchant payments, G2P payments, amongst others. This means IPSs should maximize the availability of payment channels and, predominantly payment channels, of course, and maintain a simple structure with low costs to users. For example, in promoting the adoption of merchant payments and digital payments for transport needs, for instance, as has been mentioned by most respondents, we need to enable quick and easy settlement, which increases the use of digital payments due to increased flexibility, reliability, affordability, acceptability, among many others for users. Ultimately, while scheme design, participation, and governance are important elements to use, as Sabine has mentioned, and ensure that the payment systems are instant and inclusive, they only form part of the picture. To build a digital payment ecosystem that is scaled for network effects, and equal attention is needed for the softer elements. For example, when I talk about softer elements, I just mean how features speak to the realities and needs of customers and how to encourage users, given some entrenched perspectives, as we know in Africa, and concerns regarding the use of digital financial services. Even though, in general terms, like I stated, the industry is growing and the adoption of DFS is dynamic, with notable trends. Now, talking of trends, Zach, please share more on trends contributing to the rapidly changing ecosystem. Thank you.
Thanks, Jajo. And rapid here is exactly the right word. The macro trend overall is on the pace of infrastructure development. Many more systems are in development, 21 in fact, detailed in the report, 18 of which are domestic and 3 of which are regional. Further to that, about a third of the systems that are live today have just launched within the past 2 years and are continuing to scale up with new functionalities. Both in the new systems and the ones that are continuing to build, we're seeing more of an intentional design to reach the vulnerable and poor. This is especially relevant to tap into the more than 90% of transactions, of retail transactions that continue to occur in cash. As for the specific trends, I just want to hone in into a handful of the ones on these slides that we feel will have a major impact. The first is the growth of additional technologies for instant payment systems. These include the deployment of low-cost merchant acceptance solutions like QR codes, usage of third-party payment initiation through open banking, and the market entry of tech fins like social media companies. We are seeing rising smartphone adoption and data coverage on the continent. However, there's a big caveat, since there is lagging usage of data services due to both data affordability and availability. This is leading to a continued and quite sticky reliance on USSD as the main payment channel. Fraud and cybercrime is an ever-present concern within financial services. A fraudster only needs to be lucky once, but the rest of us have to be lucky all the time. We're seeing the risk manifest in consumer education campaigns that are warning people about phishing and password protection across the continent. And we're seeing some instant payment systems evaluating the deployment of centralized fraud solutions. Finally, we are following CBDC. As I mentioned before, there's one live CBDC implementation on the continent with Nigeria's eNaira, and Ghana currently has a pilot named eSETI. There are 14 additional countries in Africa that are in various stages of CBDC exploration. It is still very early days, and we'll certainly stay apprised of central bank digital currencies and sovereign currency systems to watch whether they may impact the broader digital financial services ecosystem. There's, of course, more depth on each of these in the report, and like my colleagues, I encourage you all to read the full report and use the website tools for more information on the findings. Sabine, can you share where the barriers remain in the ecosystem and what we should anticipate moving forward?
Absolutely. So I think the biggest risk we have is that the development and the growth we're seeing into instant payment systems across Africa actually does not include more or don't include more Africans. So how do we make sure that this development is really focused on the inclusion of the ones that are the most excluded? And for that, you have barriers at the supplier side, consumer, the demand side, regulatory and cybersecurity. But for the sake of time, let me zone in just a couple of few. Me as a customer, and if I am really living on, day to day, and it doesn't make sense for me to be trying to find how do I touch every single provider, or how do I take that into consideration? So value proposition at the end of the day is key for the consumer, and that value has to come in with being able to access the service with whatever tools that I have, and that this is interoperable and the cost is affordable to me. Cost is important equation because it does matter. At the end of the day, the competition is cash. So how do we make sure that we're providing a digital ecosystem that serves the needs of the customer and is affordable enough to transcend what might be seen as cost equation when we are dealing with cash? From a regulatory standpoint, definitely opportunities to look at the ecosystem. I mean, most of the time when you're looking at some countries and interoperability, the incumbents are not necessarily the ones coming into the ecosystem or wanting to join. So sometimes it does require, from a regulatory standpoint, the central bank or the regulator overseeing the payment system to come in and really focus on the pro-core mandate and focus on interoperability to bring everybody onto the playing field and equalize that playing field regardless of independent interest. And of course, I think as customers and also for the financial service provider, we all face cyber threats, we all face a risk related to fraud. So making sure that we are protecting consumers as much as we can. So when we look through this spectrum, I think for us, the recommendation is to make sure that from a value, the ecosystem that the champion, wherever that champion is in the ecosystem, whether it is a central bank, it is an association of private sector, but those champions have they have all the support to be able to carry their mandate, and they can really push the inclusivity mandate into the design of the scheme. It is also important for us to make sure that I think if you please click on the next slide. I think you will see also some of these recommendations, but I do encourage you to look at the reports, and you will see that there's much more than what we're saying here. But the key in equalizing the opportunity for all licensed private sector and also financial service providers to play a role into the scheme and have an input on decision making is key. And also, of course, from a consumer protections perspective, we need to make sure we are enabling our customers to understand what is out there and what they can do to protect themselves and have recourse whenever that is needed. So I think for the sake of time, I will stop it there, and I encourage you to go through the reports and feel free to share with us any questions that you might have. Thank you. All right.
So we're moving to
Okay.
the Q&A session, Sabine. And you already have
Yes, we're moving.
some questions on the chat box. And the first question is, which of these IIPS has seen the fastest uptake and what are the key factors?
Zach, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. So as I mentioned, there are 4 systems that really have pervasive uptake, which would be the GADA system, a combination of 2 being their mobile money and their interbank system, Nigeria Instant Pay, Uganda Mobile Money, and Kenya Mobile Money. You know, the uptake is kind of uneven because it depends on the features and functionalities they've brought to the table. But all of those in the past few years have really skyrocketed and taken up. And again, there's specific detail on the number of transactions year over year on our interactive map. So we can recommend you check it out. They were really able to do that by driving the use cases, prioritizing the use cases that consumers really needed. They have an expansive group of use cases, and that really allows for people to begin using it in a day-to-day fashion.
Right. Thank you, Zach.
Next question.
Yes, the next question is, are the IIPS in are all the IIPS in Africa, or is this meant to be representative? Because I don't see the system used in the Ethiopia, for instance.
Okay, let me take this one. The systems that are represented in the slide are the systems that are live. And I think the question says you didn't see for Ethiopia, I think. So the live system we've been able to map are 26 domestic and 3 regional. There are also 18 of these systems that are in development. So you will find right there. And so I encourage you to go through the report and you will see those that are in development. So the challenge we have faced is we really looked across the African spectrum, the countries, to see what information was available and data. And what you see here is what we have been able to get data and mapped. So we hope that with the subsequent years and reports, we'll be able to add more information to the slide. And of course, always keeping the vision of who is already live as of June 2022. That's what's represented on the map you have here. And then what is in development and what are the information that we can learn. So we hope, and we really call to all the stakeholders on the line to advocate with us for more data transparency so that we're able to show a greater picture of what's happening on IIPS. Back to you, Barry.
Sabine, can I just quickly add one thing? Is that just note that we had a cutoff date of systems that were live by June 2022. So things that have launched since then will not show up in this report. That will be coming next year. And if there are other systems, other information that you know of as an industry stakeholder, feel free to reach out to us at info@africanenda.org so that we can gather the most comprehensive set of information possible.
Okay. Another question is there scope for regional convergence on IIPS regulation and policy given the growth in the cross-border trade for MSMEs?
Jaju, you want to take this?
Yes, I can take that one. For this particular report, the 2022 research, we didn't cover these topics. But definitely in the 2023, this is coming up because again, because of several factors, we would have given a baseline. That is, this year we've painted a picture of how the landscape looks like. Next year, we're looking to delve deep into certain topics that speak into the current trends, for example, cross-border payments and facilitating MSMEs for trade across board. Because this year we had research covering the Comesa region, and we saw that the cross-border trade, especially for MSMEs, and in the spirit of looking at IPSs that are going to facilitate high volume, low value transactions, it's essential that we also cover this in the 2023 report. So yes, we will cover this in the next edition, but not this time around.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Next question. can payment system be mature from the get-go, or would need to gradually reach maturity along the inclusivity spectrum?
That's a great question. I think it's a matter of context. So it's not to say you can start with the maturity level. That is, if you're able to make sure that all the use cases are enabled for the get-go, that you are also enabling all of the channels that are most used by the population in your country or region, and that, you know, from a governance perspective, this is a scheme where all licensed providers have access to and can have input into the decision-making process, and that you already have the proper mandate as well, as far as, you know, customer recourses that are, you know, efficient, transparent. So you could, there is no say that it has to be sequential. What we have noticed and we've seen in the market is that it's difficult to do it, but not necessarily impossible. Perhaps an example of an area where this has been done would be Brazil PIX, for instance, to look at where they've already started with all use cases enabled. But I think it really depends on the context of the country and the region and how the scheme is up. There are factors also to consider that, you know, the level of complexity is even higher to be able to start with everything already enabled. But again, it's a matter of context. So hopefully, as we continue the research every year, where we will learn from the current schemes that are there, and then we'll take into account who has done it, how long the trajectory might have taken from one area to another, one country to the others. Back to you, Barry. Oh, no, maybe my colleagues would like to add something.
Jack, is that right?
I thought you covered that perfectly. Some of the components of the mature state require this whole realm of policy and practices, especially when it comes to the consumer side. So I agree with Sabine that we want to monitor and help reinforce the journey to get there. And I think it's totally fine that people start at more of an early level and build themselves up.
Thank you, Zach. Another question is, how can central banks play how can central banks play a constructive role in promoting the development of or use of this system, this IPS system?
Jaju, you want to take?
Sure. So from what you're seeing, there are various roles that the central banks are playing. There are those that are just providing oversight in terms of policy at the policy level, defining and ensuring that, you know, that policy environment is convenient enough to allow an open and level playing field for stakeholders to participate. That is, the scheme participants to participate fairly in terms of access and contribution. And then there are those that are playing a catalytic role. So beyond the policy, what other measures are they doing? For example, some central banks we've seen having open platforms where dialogue is encouraged among stakeholders, because in terms of market participation, it's important to have these conversations between the fintechs, for example, the commercial banks, the telcos in the space, and as regards mobile money and so on. So catalytic central banks are playing this role in addition to the policy definition and refinement. Another category of central banks are going beyond just oversight and playing that catalytic role. They are actually owning and operating the schemes, either through subsidiaries or through partnership arrangement with the other stakeholders in the ecosystem. So these are the three pillars that we see in terms of the role of central banks in promoting governance and the deployment of instant payment systems.
Mary, back to you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. There is a question, I think, for the YMO zone. Maxime Lokotasing said, I have noted that no payment system in the WAMU zone is considered instant and inclusive. Have you made any recommendation to the BCAO so that WAMU, like CEMAC zone, can have an IPS like GMAC Pay?
Oh, Let me take that question. I think I will really encourage you to go through the report. We have listed the Waimu zone as IIPS in development. So it's part of the 3 regional in development that are upcoming. And for have lived and worked in West Africa, I am aware and I know that the project is ongoing for Waimu to put the instant and inclusive payment system. So I look forward to seeing that live, hopefully maybe in our next report or as we continue the subsequent reports every year. So hopefully that answers the question. Back to you, Barry.
Thank you, Sabine. What approaches do you recommend in making IIPS affordable and accessible in relatively smaller markets?
Zach, you want to take that?
Yeah, happy to take that one. So, you know, we often find that the size of the market is less salient than the ability of the market to move users to become regular digital financial services participants. You know, really looking from a global perspective, you can look at Singapore as a small country that has made such tremendous strides. On a continental level, of course, we see the same in Rwanda. Quite limited population. They've really focused on digitization, financial inclusion, and they're already seeing the benefits of that via the rollout and continued usage of their mobile money platforms and their new instant payment scheme. We do think that there is a broader question to be had here about the use of regional systems versus domestic systems. I think, as Sabine was just talking about, in the WAMA region, in the CEMAC region with GMAC Pay, they are looking at having a centralized system that can do both cross-border and the domestic processing. Of course, that makes it easier to get to that sustainable scale and overall drive down costs. Back to you, Barry.
Thank you, Zach. So next question is, what is the status of the 3 regional IPS?
Chaju, you want to take it?
Sorry, come again. The status of what?
The 3 regional IPS.
Okay, I'll welcome Zach to speak about the status of the regional IPSs. Zach, do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, just briefly, the 3 regional IPS that are live, those have launched fairly recently between GMAC Pay, TCIB, and PAPS, which of course is meant to be continent-wide. And it's still in the process of growing uptake and growing use cases. There are another 3 IPS that are in various stages of development at a regional level, which are COMESA, WAMA, and in the EAC. Those we'll continue to monitor and see how they progress over time, but we don't have any specifics we can provide about the development of those to date.
Thank you, Zach. To the point of IPS being siloed, do you think cloud-based platforms, example, the neobanks, would do better on interoperability?
That is a that's a oh, sorry, go ahead, Jaju, and I add to you.
Okay, sorry, I was just saying it's an interesting conversation, and these are some of the things that we'll be looking at the 2023 report, especially when we're looking at different business models. But what we're seeing right now, the fintechs and especially the tech fins, as mentioned by Zach, playing a critical role in terms of interoperability, yes, by either being aggregators or just ensuring that, you know, the different payment systems interrelate or interoperate, and especially for cross-border. We've seen the fintechs playing a critical role in wallet-to-wallet interoperability, especially from a regional point of view. So I think the tech fins or fintechs, you know, there's room for, you know, driving that interoperability, especially from beyond borders, you know, for the regional, or even just integrating the regional and domestic payment systems, as we have seen. We are in the process of also establishing how these two coexist and what role the fintechs are able to play, because increasingly we are seeing the number of domestic IPS is increasing and the number of regional IPS is also increasing. So who is covering what, for example? Is there an overlap of things? And is there room for the neobanks, for example, or other forms of fintech, ensuring that they extend their services to avoid duplication of effort and so on, to make sure that these payment systems are effective and that they deliver the desirable state. So yes, there is a role to play in terms of interoperability, but most importantly, we are watching this space in terms of the additional roles beyond just interconnectivity.
Let me add to that, Jaju. I think for me, the equation is making sure that we have the rails, those digital rails that will enable minimum access for all of us in Africa. And then on top of those rails, the competition is open to who can provide the most customer-centric products relevant to customers, because I sincerely believe that when the value proposition is there, the road to adoption by customer is much, much faster. So not only from the offering that they bring, but also from ensuring that it is easily usable and it's intuitive enough for customers to pick up on it. And that, I think, the neobanks, the TechFin, the FinTech, all have the opportunity to bring that layer of innovation that's going to make digital payment even more relevant and help us build a digital economy that leaves no one behind.
Thank you, Sabine. Another question is, what is the impact of CBDCs on IIPS?
Zach, you want to take that?
Yeah, why don't I start this and maybe my colleagues can add. So, we're watching central bank digital currencies because the overall impact is really yet to be known. The way that we're seeing them used today is mostly for large scale payments between two trusted entities, usually being the government and a large business, or the government and a financial institution. We're certainly not quite seeing that yet get down to the user level, where people on their phones are interacting or transacting with central bank digital currency. If it moves in certain ways, it could create an interesting layer for the end settlement of the funds to be done in a way that is more efficient. It could, subsume or replace the use of an instant payment system if it can be reached to the end user. The question that I think we're kind of all left asking ourselves is, what will that really look like within the current technological context of Africa? The lift from a financial institution to upgrade their system to be able to handle transactions that are going through the blockchain, which is what any CBDC would rely on, is a really significant technological upgrade. Who is going to pay for that? How are those costs going to be passed along to consumers? How is that going to impact the overall ecosystem? These are all relatively unanswered questions. And until the systems have a little some more legs to stand on, I don't think there's going to be quite a clear answer. Sabine, did you want to add to that?
Yes, absolutely. No, I was going to say also that wholesale CBDC, retail CBDC, and how this is going to impact the financial inclusion landscape within different countries. The question is still out there. I think what I struggle with sometimes is understanding better if CBDC is going to help us include more of the ones that are excluded today, or if it will provide more flexibility for those who are already included in the ecosystem. And again, the question is still out there, and this is part of the trends that we have highlighted as impacting IPS moving forward, and we will certainly be looking at it every year as we move this forward, and I will see more of those schemes leveraging CBDC in their offering.
Thank you, Sabine. With an increased new investment and regulatory shifts continue to shape the e-payment landscape on the continent. cash is still king in Africa. How do you envisage the transformation of cash to digital with consumers?
That's a great question. Judge, do you want to start? All right.
I'll try and respond to this. Well, cash is still king because of a number of things. Like I mentioned, from what we see in terms of the consumer research, there are existing use cases for payments, but they're occurring in cash. The reason being the existing payment systems or solutions do not cover the exact needs of either household level or the MSME level. In transforming cash to digital, as from the question, I think it just calls for understanding, first of all, what needs exist. For example, we are getting into the era of, there's a lot of talk about cross-border payments, remittances, and so on. Identifying what these needs are and using this insight to design instant payment systems that support specific solutions that speak to the day-to-day needs. For example, from what we're seeing, the MSMEs are complaining about the immediacy of how they need to pay their suppliers. If they're not able to pay their suppliers and get, and there's that immediate gratification, for example, if there's a charge to holding or to accepting digital payments from their customers, these are things that will frustrate efforts for this transformation. From a household perspective, if users are feeling that they are not as flexible by holding digital funds as they are in terms of when they hold cash, definitely there'll be some frustrations in trying to make digital payments. So I think at the end of the day, it's just regulation needs to allow for that open and level playing field amongst players. Let's get some innovation from the newbies, the fintechs that are emerging, and all sorts of asset light business models that help in terms of bringing down the cost while delivering quality and meaningful solutions to speak to the use cases, the needs of either individuals or MSMEs. All in efforts to build that digital ecosystem, because right now, what we're seeing in Africa, we're largely a cash in, cash out economy. We are yet to get to that digital, and it calls for these bits and pieces in terms of understanding the demand, the willingness and ability to pay as well, and matching that with the supply side payment systems that truly extend digital solutions that are capturing the daily needs. I mean, the daily need to pay. I hope I have, shared some of, what it takes for that transformation to happen.
Jojo, let me add my perspectives here. I think the competition is cash. As much as we see a lot of competition between different service providers, different schemes and all that, the real competition is cash. And the question we need to answer, which we haven't yet, is what is the additional value that you are giving me to go from cash to digital? And if that value, the additional value, is compelling enough, then we will see more and more people leveraging digital payment. And you've touched it, Judge, by saying, the broad use cases, if they are all digitized, then there's an additional value that comes in. I know my grandmother, when she used to ask me for money, well, she's seen a value where she actually don't bother that much about calling me and asking me. She sends a message and she's like, send me a mobile money. Because time is an additional value that we can find in. Distance is an additional value that we can find in. Transcending time, distance, making sure that the value added is there, but also if with the ecosystem of innovation that's being built through the fintech, the tech fin and whatnot, if the incentive to be in that digital ecosystem add more, such as a layer that's going to give access to savings, remunerated savings, give access to credit, give access to investment avenues for all of us, then again, more value is built into that digital transition, and there's more incentive also by the public and private sector to convince people of that value. Perhaps we'll see a faster transition towards the digital economy.
Sabine, thank you so much. We are running out of time. There's a lot of questions on the chat, but I think that we will continue the conversation in our community of practice. I invite everybody who are not yet in this community of practice to join us on LinkedIn. We will have weekly conversation around the key findings, and then we will have an opportunity to address all your questions that were not addressed during the conversation. I also invite you to go on our website, www.africanenda.org/in/SIIPS2022 to download the report and all the assets that are available. You have videos, you have case studies, an interactive map with all the data from the report. And if you have any question, feel free to reach out to us through our email info@africanenda.org. Thank you so much for your time, and see you in a couple of weeks for a new AfricaNenda industry event. I'll pass on to the speakers if you want to maybe wrap up, and then we close.
Yes, thank you very much, Barry. I think for me, it is important to remind all of us that this is a collaborative work in the report that's produced working in partnership with the World Bank and United Nations ECA, and that we've also had our partners from the research side, Senfree and Frontier, for the consumer research. So we also want to thank our sponsors, the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, as well as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations, who have contributed to support the realization of this work. So thank you again for all of you for taking the time to be with us today. And we do hope that the conversation continues throughout our weekly discussions on the community of practice, or of course, any other mediums you would like to use to reach out to us. Thank you again to my colleagues, Zach and Jaju. And of course, there's an entire team behind us that you don't see today, who has done a fantastic work on the comms, the partnership, and the extended team at AfricaNenda and pre-project as well. And all of us, thank you for your support.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.